I'm so excited to share the recent projects that we've been working on in graphic design. And thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Emily Burns, an assistant professor in graphic design. And I tend to work primarily with sophomores, although I've been recently working more with seniors. So the projects you're going to see today are all from my second year sophomore graphic design classes, and specifically typography classes. So they all have a typographic tilt to them. So let's make sure you can see. All right, so the course that I'm talking about is GD 203, and it's the typography 2 class. And so one of the challenges of incorporating sustainability into these specific classes is that I also have a responsibility to make sure that the foundational knowledge of typography is coming through. So it's been really fun for me to craft these individual projects each semester, because I get to balance all of the sort of technical, typographic, practical knowledge, but with really fun and impactful projects as well. So this specific project I'm going to share first was the second project we did this semester called Type as Brand. And our client, right, the students are practicing the client designer relationship at this point, where they're starting to actually not just receive briefs from me, but also receive briefs from actual clients and actually come up with real solutions. So we were very lucky to work with a new organization called MC2WET, which stands for Meaningful Climate Change and Watershed Education Toolkits. And this is a combination of several people that are also related to the Sustainability Institute. And we were working closely with Ilona Ballrich on this project, and she is the one who connected us with this organization. And they had received a grant to produce these watershed education toolkits, but the challenge here was that after spending a lot of time making these really incredible lesson plans for teachers to use to teach about climate change and about watersheds, the next step was to make it accessible to the teachers and actually functional and usable, and something that would actually be used in the classroom, right? So I'll show you some images in a second to illustrate that. So the SDGs that we were working toward here were clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, and life on land. And one of the first steps the students undertook, which is a really important part of the process, is the creative brief, which is where they speak directly to the client and get all of the background information about the project. And it's up to the students, with my assistance, to really wrap their head around what is the problem and what can we really clarify and articulate what exactly the problem that we're trying to solve, so that we can come up with a usable and functional solution. So this was just the creative brief from one of the groups. The way this was set up in this class is we had a big class. So I broke the students up into groups of 4, and each group came up with their own solution to the same problem. And then at the end, the client chose the solution that they felt worked the best to actually be produced into a usable toolkit for teachers. So, so they all kind of got to work collaboratively, and that was a really fun part of the process. So some of the things that they articulated as being really important to the process was to allow the 5th and 6th grade students, which were the demographic that we were making these for, which was another level of complexity for this project, is we actually had 2 target audiences for this. Which one was teachers. So we were creating a workbook for teachers to actually use to implement the lessons, but we were also creating a student-centered workbook journal that the students would actually use and participate with. So the goal for that is to practice inquiry-based learning, so that the students were actually going out into nature and interacting with the content that the teachers were providing, and providing their own responses in this journal. And then the other goal was to educate young generations through more hands-on activities and really get them out of the classroom and learning in the environment. Um, One of the drivers was to incorporate climate change into current place-based watershed educational programming. So the goal with this is very specific to this local region and any regions that are similar to this region in the way that the environment is actually set up. So we can use this here in State College and Penns Valley and related locations that have a similar kind of ecological situation, but any other locations around the world that have a similar kind of ecosystem can also utilize the same toolkit. Additionally, the goal was to create a visually compelling toolkit for students to make them excited to want to engage with the content and learn about climate change in their local community and create a compelling lesson plan for the teachers. So the first part of this, and as you can probably see, it's kind of a complicated project for the students, especially at the sophomore year, which is one of the reasons why I like it, because it really gets them used to what it would be like to be a designer working with a client like this. So I'm just showing you the example that was chosen by MC2 Wet to actually be used for their identity. So the first part of the project was the students actually created a visual identity system to brand MC2 Wet as an organization. So everything that they were to do moving forward would be branded with this visual identity. And it was all typographically based. So this is the logo that the students in this group created for their organization, along with this simplified secondary logo. They created brand identity guidelines for MC2 Wet, which allows them to correctly use the visual identity moving forward on any other deliverables that they might create. And color scheme, and also the copy guidelines over here on the right-hand side. So any additional materials that would be created by them could keep a consistent and professional brand so that they could more easily create additional materials, even though the class is actually over and the students are off doing other things. It gives them tools that they can actually use moving forward. Of course, you can't forget the merch. Which these are some examples of hypothetical merchandise that would be branded with their information. The second aspect of the project is the teacher workbook and lesson plans. So this is the cover of the workbook with original artwork by one of the students. Here's some of the interior spreads from the teacher workbook. So this is the aspect of the project that is teacher facing. So this, our audience for this would be the actual teachers teaching these lessons. And so the lessons were all created by the participants in MC2 Wet, and they received grant funding to create all of this curriculum about watersheds and water use. And one of the reasons I love this project so much is the amount of impact that we can have through design is really quite large. If you think about the many, many hundreds of students and potentially thousands of students that will get access to this educational toolkit as a result of this project, to me is really exciting, in part because I, as a young student, had access to ecological education as part of my middle school and high school education. And I really feel like that has changed my worldview. And so I think the impact on teaching kids about climate change at the 5th and 6th grade level has the potential for a really wide impact. And that's really exciting. But that impact can sometimes look kind of boring, which is lesson plans. But the lesson plans really needed to be organized with a clear hierarchy. And this is a 50-page book. Right, there's a lot of content that needs to be organized here. And so the students did a really amazing job of making this content, which was very complicated, very easy to read and easy to use and accessible for teachers so that they could actually go into the classroom and be excited to use it and have the tools at their fingertips to be able to do it. Because as we all know, as teachers, if it's not making sense and it's not easy to use, the teachers, especially right now dealing with all the effects of COVID, are much less likely to actually be able to implement it. So making it user-friendly was really important. So here's just a couple examples of the 50-page book of information, lots of different types of information and tables and details that all needed to be organized in a way that was usable. The third part of this project was the student experience journal. So our audience for this deliverable were actual 5th and 6th graders. So the setup of this was slightly different. Obviously has a cohesive visual identity across all of the things we were building, but is a more kid-friendly aesthetic. And so these were printed journals or on the iPad that students can use to answer questions that are posed by the teachers when going out into the environment, such as how does climate change affect bird populations and what risk does this pose to the surrounding environment? And all of these pages relate directly to a specific lesson in the teacher workbook. So they're all designed to integrate seamlessly together so the students have a more interactive experience. My graphic design students had a lot of fun with this because they were able to illustrate the bugs and create lots of different imagery and fun stuff in addition to the typography to make this more fun for the students to use. And this is just an example of what the students got in Google Drive to make the workbook. So as you can see, kind of a complex series of many, many pages of documents that they had to organize. And that's one of the things about being a designer that is difficult is organizing all this information and making it easy to use. But I think the students did a great job with that. So that's that first project. And we're very excited to see how that ends up. And hopefully I can report back with progress notes on that. The second project from this same class is called Sustainable Quarterly. And this is a publication project where students design and create the entire concept around something related to sustainability. It could cover any of the SDGs of their choice in any subject of their choosing. So I'm just showing a couple of examples about this. In order to follow through with sustainability, the idea is that this would be disseminated digitally, even though we're looking at spreads of what would look like a print magazine. None of these were actually printed. And this, by the way, I should mention all of the projects I'm showing today were done entirely virtually over Zoom during COVID. So I'm really, really proud of the work the students were able to do during that especially challenging time. So this is Ripple. This was created by student Kimi Mate, and it's a closer look into the world of water. And so she did a really beautiful series of layouts and talking about water from a lot of different perspectives. And one of the things about this project that I think is unique is that the students are actually coming up with all the content as well as the design. A lot of the time designers are receiving content from other people, but the student is actually the creator of all of the content. And they actually went out and found real people doing real work in these subjects and interviewed them. So part of the requirement is that they actually have to go out and create this content from nothing and find people who are working in these fields and interview them and actually learn about it and then put the content into a design. So this is not fake. You could sit down and you could read this whole publication and it's all actually real content, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so this is just a few more examples of the water publication, talking about plastics. Every student came to this from a different perspective. So just a totally different perspective here is a publication called Seedlings by Jane Yun. And this is about green burials and how burials can become a lot more sustainable. And so these were all their own creative ideas. I did not tell them, what they had to do as long as it was addressing the SDGs in some way. So really beautiful design and real content about learning more about green burials, which I thought was really interesting. And then the last example I'll show is just sustainable agriculture and some content about this. So yeah, so that's just a couple examples of the projects that I've been working on and look forward to continue collaborating with Sustainability Institute. And they've just done, in particular, Ilona Balrich has connected us with such incredible community partners that have allowed us to really do some really cool projects. So I'm really appreciative of all of her efforts. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, just let me know.